The desert wind carried the taste of burnt earth and dying grass as it swept across the vast expanse of the Arizona Territory. Red mesas rose like ancient sentinels against the cloudless sky, their shadows stretching long and dark across the parched valley below. The year was 1882, and the land bore the scars of a merciless summer. Riverbeds cracked like broken pottery, sagebrush bleached white as bone, and dust devils dancing their wild waltz across the barren plains. Sarah McKenna pressed her handkerchief to her lips, trying to filter the grit from the air as the wagon jolted over another rut. Her wedding dress, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, lay in the trunk beside her, a vision of ivory silk and delicate lace that seemed almost absurd in this harsh landscape. At 19, with honey-colored hair and eyes the shade of prairie lupines, she was returning home to the Double K Ranch where her betrothed, Thomas Hartley, awaited. "Not much further now, Miss Sarah," called Jake, the grizzled driver, his voice barely audible over the creaking wheels and the protests of the two guards riding alongside. "Should make the ranch by sundown. Lord willing." Lord willing. Sarah's fingers found her mother's silver cross at her throat. Out here, in this corridor between settlements where Apache war parties still rode with impunity, those words carried weight. The Treaty of 1880 had promised peace, but treaties were paper things, fragile as autumn leaves in this unforgiving land. The other passengers, a Methodist minister and his wife, a mining company representative, sat rigid with barely concealed fear. They all knew the stories. Stagecoaches found burned to their axles, settlements reduced to ash. The Apache wars might be officially over, but tell that to the warriors who refused to bow to Washington's distant decrees. Sarah tried to focus on happier thoughts. Thomas's last letter, promising a proper house with real glass windows, the apple orchard he planned to plant come spring, a life of certainty and comfort, far from the boarding school in St. Louis where she'd spent the last 3 years. She was going home to begin her real life. The first arrow struck the wagon's side with a sound like splitting wood. "Apache!" Jake's scream tore through the afternoon heat. "Guns up! Guns!" His words died in a gurgle as a second arrow found his throat. Chaos erupted. The horses screamed and reared. The minister's wife shrieked prayers. The guards fired wildly at shadows that materialized from the very earth, warriors painted in clay and ash, moving with terrible grace between the rocks. Sarah's world tilted as the wagon lurched to a stop. Through the dust and gun smoke, she saw them clearly now. A dozen riders, perhaps more, circling like wolves. Their war cries pierced the air, ancient and bone-chilling. And then she saw him. He rode a black stallion that moved like liquid shadow, and even in the melee, he commanded attention. Tall and lean, with hair black as a raven's wing flowing past his shoulders. War paint striped his face in crimson and white, but it couldn't hide the sharp intelligence in his dark eyes or the cruel beauty of his features. While others whooped and fired, he sat motionless, watching, calculating. Naichi. They called him Son of Thunder. She'd heard the name whispered in frontier towns, a warrior who'd refused the reservation, who struck at settlements with the speed of lightning and vanished like smoke. They said he was the nephew of Cochise himself, that he carried the old chief's rage in his veins. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and something cold traced down Sarah's spine. The fight was brief and brutal. The guards fell quickly, overwhelmed by superior numbers and positioning. The minister tried to shield his wife, both falling together in a tangle of limbs and spreading crimson. The mining representative attempted to run, making it perhaps 20 yards before an arrow brought him down. Sarah pressed herself against the wagon's floor, her hands over her ears, trying to block out the sounds of death. But rough hands seized her arms, dragging her into the merciless sunlight. She fought, clawing and kicking, her traveling dress tearing on the wagon's edge. "No, let me go, please, A hand clamped over her mouth, and she found herself staring up into those pitiless dark eyes. This close, she could see the scars on his chest, the turquoise and silver at his throat. He smelled of sage smoke and leather, of the wild places beyond the reach of civilization. He studied her face with the intensity of a hawk, then lifted her as easily as a child. She pounded her fists against his chest, but he might as well have been carved from the red rock of the mesas. In one fluid motion, he swept her onto his horse. The surviving Apache warriors gathered the horses and what supplies they wanted, working with practiced efficiency. Sarah watched in horror as they scalped the dead, not all of them. She noticed with strange detachment, just the men who'd fought. Naichi spoke in Apache, sharp, commanding words that sent his warriors scattering to their tasks. Then, holding Sarah firmly against him with one arm, he guided his horse to where the minister's wife lay motionless. "Your God did not save them," he said, his English accented but clear, each word chosen with care. "Their papers, their prayers, their promises, all dust now." He raised his voice so the other warriors could hear. "The Apache warrior has taken a bride." The declaration rang across the valley, and his men responded with savage cries of approval. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Bride? No, she was Thomas's bride. She had a life waiting, a future planned. "You're making a mistake." She managed to gasp when his grip shifted. "My fiancé will come for me. The army will. Let them come." His laugh was dark as winter thunder. "They will find only wind and stone." He wheeled the stallion around, and Sarah caught a last glimpse of the destroyed wagon, the scattered bodies. Her trunk with its precious cargo burst open, white silk spilling into the dust like spilled milk. Then Naichi's heels touched the horse's flanks, and they were flying across the desert, leaving civilization and everything she'd ever known behind. The war party rode hard, putting distance between themselves and the inevitable pursuit. Sarah clung to the horse's mane, her body rigid with terror and rage. The landscape blurred past, red rocks and thorny ocotillo, dry washes and hidden canyons known only to those who called this desolation home. As the sun began its descent, painting the mountains in shades of blood and gold, Sarah forced herself to think past the fear. She was alive. That was more than the others could say. And where there was life, there was hope. She would survive this. She would escape. She would return to Thomas and the life that had been stolen from her, in her captor's arms, feeling the rhythm of the horse beneath them and the wild wind in her face. Sarah McKenna made herself a promise. They might have taken her body, but her spirit remained her own. Whatever came next, whatever trials awaited, she would not break. She would not surrender. Behind them, the wagon burned, sending black smoke into the darkening sky, a signal fire that would bring retribution, but far too late. The Apache warrior had indeed stolen a bride, but he had no idea what he had truly taken. In the gathering dusk, as they rode toward the secret places of the earth, neither captor nor captive could know that this violent beginning would reshape both their destinies. The wild had claimed them both, and in its fierce embrace, everything they believed about enemies and love, about civilization and savagery, would soon burn away like morning mist. Only the truth would remain, hard and beautiful as the desert itself. The night descended upon them like a shroud, and still they rode. Sarah's throat burned with thirst, her lips cracked and bleeding. The initial terror had given way to a bone-deep exhaustion that made her limbs feel like lead. Every time her eyes began to close, Naichi's arm would tighten around her waist, keeping her upright in the saddle. They stopped only once, at a hidden spring nestled between towering rocks. The warriors let their horses drink while maintaining watchful positions. When Naichi offered her a water gourd, Sarah's pride warred with her desperate need. She lasted perhaps 10 seconds before snatching it from his hands, gulping the precious liquid so fast it made her cough. "Slowly," he commanded, pulling the gourd away. "The desert takes those who are greedy." She glared at him through tangled hair. "Like you took me?" His expression didn't change. "Drink slowly, or don't drink at all." When they mounted again, Sarah tried to throw herself from the horse. She'd rather take her chances with the desert than remain his prisoner. But Naichi caught her easily, his reflexes lightning quick, and bound her wrists with a leather cord. "Foolish woman," he muttered, settling her more firmly against him. "You would die before the sun finds you." "Better dead than dishonored," she spat back. He made a sound that might have been amusement. You speak of honor? Your people who break every treaty, who poison our water holes, who slaughter buffalo for sport. They know honor. The second night was worse. They made camp in a canyon so narrow the walls seemed to press in from both sides. No fire, too risky with pursuit likely following. Sarah huddled against a rock, the leather cord still binding her wrists, and watched the Apache warriors disappear into the darkness like ghosts. On watch, she realized. Even here, in their element, they took no chances. Naichi sat across from her, a shadow among shadows. She could feel his eyes on her, studying, always studying. Why? She finally asked, her voice hoarse. Why take me? You were there. That's not an answer. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, your soldiers took my sister last winter, 12 years old. They said they would educate her, make her civilized. His voice carried bitter weight. She died of their diseases in 3 months. So yes, I take their women. Let them know how it feels to lose. Sarah's anger flared. I've never taken anyone's sister. I've never even been to Arizona before. You're punishing me for crimes I didn't commit. And my sister? What was her crime? The question hung between them, unanswerable. When Sarah tried to escape that night, creeping away while she thought Naichi slept, she made it perhaps 50 feet before he materialized beside her. She struck at him with a rock she'd hidden, but he deflected it easily, his face showing something like disappointment. The third day brought them into mountains she didn't recognize, ancient peaks that clawed at the sky, where eagles circled and the air grew thin. The horses picked their way along trails that seemed impossible, hooves finding purchase on paths no wider than a handspan. Sarah had stopped trying to memorize the route. Even if she escaped, she'd be hopelessly lost. The knowledge sat heavy in her stomach, along with a growing fear that no rescue was coming. How would anyone track them through this labyrinth of stone? That evening, they stopped at another hidden spring, this one feeding a small pool surrounded by cottonwoods. The other warriors moved off to tend the horses and gather food, leaving Sarah under Naichi's watchful eye. Wash, he ordered, gesturing to the pool. You smell like fear and dust. Her face burned. I won't. Not with you watching. Then remain filthy. He shrugged, settling against a tree. But we reach my people tomorrow. You think they will be impressed by a woman who reeks like a dying animal? The casual cruelty of his words stung more than she cared to admit. Sarah looked at the cool, clear water, then at her torn dress, caked with dirt and dried blood. Not hers. She realized with a shudder, the minister's wife's. Perhaps. Turn around, she demanded. To her surprise, he did, presenting his back to her. You have nowhere to run, white woman, and the water is too shallow to drown yourself. I know because captives have tried. Sarah waded into the pool fully clothed, not trusting him enough to remove even her outer garments. The water was shockingly cold, but it felt like heaven against her burned skin. She scrubbed at her face, her arms, tried to rinse the worst of the blood from her dress. When she emerged, shivering, Naichi had built a small fire. He handed her a blanket, Apache woven, she noted, with intricate patterns in red and black. Thank you, she said stiffly, the words tasting strange. He studied her again with that unnerving intensity. You're not like the other white women we've taken. How many? She bit off the question, not sure she wanted to know. They cry, beg, promise gold, horses, anything. He touched the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. You fight, even when you know you cannot win. My mother taught me that surrender is its own kind of death. Your mother was Apache? The question was so unexpected that Sarah almost laughed. Irish, but she survived the famine. Came here with nothing. She used to say the English tried to break them with hunger, but the Irish were too stubborn to die. Naichi made that sound again, not quite amusement, but something close. Irish, Apache, perhaps not so different. They sat in silence as the fire burned low. Sarah pulled the blanket tighter, exhaustion making her eyelids heavy. just before she drifted off. She heard him speak again, so quietly she might have imagined it. "Tomorrow, everything changes. My people will test you. Some will want you dead. Others—" He didn't finish. "Your spirit is strong. You will need it." She woke before dawn to find he'd covered her with his own blanket as well. The gesture confused her. This small kindness from a man who'd torn her from everything she knew. As they prepared to ride, she caught him favoring his left side, a wound from the raid. She realized that he'd hidden until now. "You're hurt," she said without thinking. His face closed off immediately. "Mount the horse." But as they rode that final day toward his village, Sarah found herself noticing things she'd missed in her terror. The way he'd rationed water so she had enough. How he'd positioned himself between her and the other warriors when they looked too long. The careful way he'd bound her wrists, tight enough to hold, not tight enough to cut off blood flow. He was still her captor. She still hated him for what he'd done. But Sarah was beginning to understand that nothing in this harsh land was simple, including the man whose actions had shattered her life, yet who spoke of honor and loss with a pain that echoed her own. As the sun reached its zenith, Naichi pointed to smoke rising from a valley ahead. "My people," he said simply. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd survived the journey, but what awaited her there? She thought of her mother's words about the English and the Irish, about breaking and refusing to break. "I won't be your slave," she said, lifting her chin. He turned in the saddle to look at her fully. "No," he agreed. "You will be something much more difficult. You will be the white woman who must earn her place among the Apache. Many have tried. Most fail. And if I fail," his dark eyes gave nothing away, "then the desert will have you after all." As they descended toward the village, Sarah McKenna, stolen bride, captive, survivor, made herself another promise. She would not just earn her place. She would make them respect her. These people who'd taken everything, and someday, somehow, she would make Naichi himself understand what he'd destroyed. The smoke grew closer, and with it, the sound of drums. Her old life was dead, left bleeding in the dust with those poor souls at the wagon. But Sarah was Irish enough to know that from death could come rebirth. If one was strong enough to seize it, she would be strong enough. She had to be. The Apache village sprawled across the valley floor like a living thing. Wickiups of bent willow and hide clustered near a meandering creek. Smoke rose from cooking fires, carrying the scent of roasting meat and pinyon pine. Children played in the dust between dwellings, their laughter dying as the war party approached. Women looked up from their work, grinding corn, scraping hides, weaving baskets, and Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The drums stopped. Naichi rode straight through the center of camp, his back rigid with pride, displaying his captive like a trophy of war. Sarah forced herself to sit straight, meeting the stares with as much dignity as she could muster. She would not cower. She would not give them the satisfaction. An elderly woman spat in the dust as they passed. A warrior called out something in Apache that made several others laugh harshly. Children ran alongside the horse, pointing and chattering, until their mothers called them back with sharp words. They stopped before a wickiup larger than the others, decorated with painted symbols Sarah couldn't read. An ancient man emerged, his face a map of deep lines and old scars, white hair hanging to his waist. He wore a necklace of bear claws and turquoise, and his eyes, still sharp despite his years, fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her skin crawl. This was Nana, she would later learn, the eldest of their band, keeper of the old ways, whose word carried weight even Naichi must respect. The old man spoke at length in Apache, his voice rising and falling like wind through the canyons. Sarah caught her own word for white repeated several times, always with the tone one might use for snake or scorpion. Naichi responded in the same language, his words careful, measured. An argument, she realized, about her. Other warriors gathered, the ones who'd ridden in the raid and others who'd stayed behind. She recognized the barely leashed violence in their stances, the way hands rested on knife hilts, These men had lost family to white soldiers, had seen their land stolen acre by acre. To them, she was the enemy given flesh. A woman pushed through the crowd, younger than Sarah, perhaps 17, with a face that might have been beautiful if not for the scar that ran from eye to jaw. She stalked up to Sarah and spoke in accented English. "White witch," she hissed. "You bring death here. Your people will come with guns, burn our homes, take our children." She grabbed a handful of Sarah's tangled hair, yanking hard enough to bring tears. "Better to kill you now. Leave your body for the buzzards." "Louis." Naichi's voice carried warning. "Enough." The scarred woman, Louis, released Sarah's hair but didn't back away. "She is not your woman, cousin. She is no one's woman. She is a curse." More Apache pressed close, voices rising in anger. Sarah's heart hammered, but she forced herself to meet Louis's eyes steadily. Something her mother used to say echoed in her mind. "Never let them see you bend. Mostorin, the moment you bend, you break." "I am nobody's curse," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I am Sarah McKenna, daughter of Bridget McKenna, and I've done nothing to any of you." Louis laughed, ugly and sharp. "Nothing? Your people do nothing when they take our lands, nothing when they poison our water, nothing when they—" "When they what?" Sarah interrupted, anger overcoming fear. "When did I poison your water? When did I steal your land? I'm a teacher's daughter from Missouri. I came here to marry a rancher, not to wage war on anyone. All whites wage war." An older warrior growled. "With your diseases, your whiskey, your lies written on paper." "Then you're no better," Sarah shot back. "Taking innocent people from stagecoaches, leaving them dead in the dust. How does killing a minister's wife avenge your losses? How does taking me bring back anything you've lost?" The crowd stirred, angry murmurs rising. Someone threw a pebble that struck Sarah's shoulder. Another spat at her feet. Naichi dismounted in one fluid motion, positioning himself subtly between Sarah and the most aggressive of the crowd. "She speaks boldly for a captive," Nana observed, switching to English. His voice was like dried leather, soft but somehow carrying over the noise. "Perhaps too boldly. She speaks truth," Naichi replied. "This one is not like the others. She has strength. Strength can be broken." Louis's scarred face twisted. "Let the women have her. We'll see how strong she is when she learns to scrape hides until her fingers bleed, carry water until her back breaks." "Your white skin won't save you here, witch." Sarah slid from the horse without help, her legs shaky but holding. She stood as tall as her small frame allowed, chin raised. "I'm not afraid of work, and I'm not afraid of you." It was a lie. She was terrified. But she'd learned from watching her mother face down landlords and creditors that sometimes a good lie was better than showing weakness. Several women laughed, but it wasn't friendly. One stepped forward, older than Lily but with the same hostile eyes. She circled Sarah slowly, examining her like livestock. "Soft," she pronounced. "Weak. Look at these hands. Never held anything heavier than a book. This pale skin will burn and blister. She'll beg for death within a moon." "Then let her prove otherwise," Naichi said. "She is my captive, taken in fair raid. By our law says nothing about keeping white women." Nana interrupted. "This is new foolishness, born of too much hate and not enough wisdom." He studied Sarah with those ancient eyes. "But perhaps there is a purpose to this. The whites take our children to teach them white ways. Maybe we should teach this one Apache ways. See if whites can learn what they try to force on us." The crowd's mood shifted, becoming speculative rather than purely hostile. Sarah sensed a test in the old man's words, though she didn't fully understand it. "She'll fail," Louis predicted. "They always do. Too weak, too proud to learn." Sarah stepped toward the scarred woman, close enough to see the pain behind the hatred. "Try me." For a moment, something flickered in Louis's eyes. Surprise, perhaps even a glimmer of respect. Then her face hardened again. "Tomorrow, white woman, when the sun rises, you begin to learn what it means to be Apache. Tonight—" She smiled, and it was worse than her scowls. "Tonight you may rest. You'll need it." The crowd began to disperse, though many threw final glares or muttered threats. Nietzsche took Sarah's arm, guiding her to a small wickiup at the camp's edge. "This is yours," he said simply. Sarah peered inside. Buffalo hides covered the floor, and basic supplies were stacked against one wall: water gourds, blankets, a grinding stone. It was crude by any standard, but it was shelter. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Your cousin is right. I'm a burden, a danger. Why not just end it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "You asked why I took you. I said because you were there. That was truth, but not all truth." He touched his side where the hidden wound was. "In the fight, when your men were dying, you didn't hide. You tried to help the woman who was already beyond help, even knowing you might die for it." Sarah remembered those terrible moments, crawling to the minister's wife, trying to stop the bleeding even as arrows flew overhead. It was the human thing to do. She said quietly, "Yes." His dark eyes held something she couldn't name. "Human. That's what I saw. Not white, not enemy, human." He turned to leave, then paused. "Tomorrow will be hard. They will try to break you. Not from cruelty, though it will seem cruel. They test you as they would test their own daughters, to see if you're worth keeping alive. And if I fail?" He looked back at her, his face unreadable in the gathering dusk. "Then I was wrong about you, and Lily will have her way." After he left, Sarah sat in her strange new home, listening to the sounds of the village: children being called to dinner, dogs barking, the rhythmic sound of corn being ground, normal sounds of life, so different yet oddly similar to any small town. She thought of Thomas, probably searching for her by now. Would he find the destroyed stagecoach? Would he think her dead? The thought of him mourning her sent a sharp pain through her chest. They'd exchanged letters for 2 years, planning their life together. He was a good man, steady and kind. He'd promised her safety, stability, a normal life. Instead, she was here, in an Apache camp where most wanted her dead, kept alive by the whim of a warrior who'd stolen her for reasons she didn't fully understand. As darkness fell, someone left food outside her wickiup, a wooden bowl of stew that smelled of venison and wild onions, flatbread still warm from the fire. No one spoke to her or even acknowledged her, but the food was there. Sarah ate slowly, surprised by her hunger. Tomorrow she would begin. What? Learning to be Apache? The idea was absurd. She was Sarah McKenna, educated, civilized, engaged to be married. She didn't belong here. But as she lay on the buffalo hides, listening to the night sounds of this strange place, she remembered her mother's stories of Ireland, how the English had tried to stamp out their language, their customs, their very identity, how some had bent and broken, while others had adapted, survived, even thrived. "You come from survivors, most Orin." Her mother had said, "When the world tries to break you, you bend like the reed in the wind. But you don't break, never break." Sarah closed her eyes, pulling the Apache blanket around her. Tomorrow they would try to break her. But tonight, against all odds, she was alive. She had shelter, food, and, strangest of all, a protector in the man who'd taken everything from her. The drums began again, distant and rhythmic. Sarah listened to their ancient heartbeat and made her third promise since this nightmare began. She would not just survive, she would learn, and somehow, she would find a way to bridge the chasm between who she'd been and who she might need to become. In the darkness of her wickiup, alone but for the first time not entirely friendless, Sarah McKenna began her transformation. The challenge came 3 days later, after Sarah had begun to find her rhythm in the grueling routine of Apache women's work. Her hands were raw from grinding corn, her back ached from hauling water, but she hadn't complained, hadn't begged, hadn't broken. Perhaps that was why Karuk decided to test her resolve. Karuk was everything Nietzsche was not, thick where Nietzsche was lean, crude where Nietzsche was controlled, ruled by appetite rather than thought. He'd lost his woman to soldiers' bullets the previous winter and had been eyeing Sarah with increasing boldness since her arrival. The confrontation began at the river, where Sarah was washing clothes alongside other women. Karuk appeared on the bank above, his shadow falling across her work. "White woman," he called in broken English. "You work like Apache now. Maybe you warm bed like Apache too." The other women fell silent, their hands stilling in the water. Sarah kept scrubbing, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Naichi keeps you like pet." Karuk continued, descending the bank. "But Naichi is young, foolish. Karuk knows what to do with enemy women." "I'm nobody's pet," Sarah said evenly, not looking up. "And I'm not your enemy." He laughed, an ugly sound. "All whites are enemy, but maybe Karuk teach you to be good Apache woman, better than Naichi's soft ways." Sarah stood slowly, water dripping from her hands. The other women watched, some with sympathy, others with the cold interest of those watching a fight between dogs. "I learn from the women," she said carefully. "That's enough teaching for me." Karuk's face darkened. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the bear grease in his hair. "You refuse Karuk?" "I refuse any man who thinks women are possessions to be taken." The words came out stronger than she intended, carrying across the water. The watching women stirred. Even Li Lui, who'd been hardest on Sarah, looked surprised. Karuk's hand shot out, grabbing Sarah's wrist. "White witch needs lesson in respect. Release her." Naiche's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. He stood on the bank above, still as carved stone, but Sarah had learned to read the danger in that stillness. Karuk didn't release her. "This not your concern. Son of thunder. You bring woman to camp, she becomes camp's woman. Old way. Old way says warrior who takes captive has first claim. Until he releases that claim, she's under his protection." Naichi descended the bank with the fluid grace that marked all his movements. "I haven't released my claim. Then fight for it," Karuk snarled. Shoving Sarah aside, she stumbled but kept her feet, pride not letting her fall. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Other warriors had gathered, drawn by the promise of conflict. Sarah saw the calculation in their faces. Karuk was older, heavier, had more battles behind him. Naichi was faster, smarter, but still recovering from the wound he'd hidden so carefully. "So be it," Naichi said simply. The fight began without ceremony. Karuk charged like a bull, relying on brute strength. Naichi danced aside, using speed and technique against power. They grappled in the sand, raising dust, neither giving quarter. Sarah watched with sick fascination. This was her fault. Two men fighting over her like she was a prize to be won. Yet she knew it was more than that. This was about old ways versus new, about different visions of what their people should become. Karuk landed a brutal blow to Naichi's wounded side, and he went down hard. The older warrior pressed his advantage, hands reaching for Naichi's throat. Sarah found herself moving without thought, but Li Lui caught her arm. "No," the scarred woman said quietly. "This is his fight. Interfere and you shame him worse than defeat." Naichi rolled at the last second, using Karuk's momentum against him. They tumbled toward the water, a tangle of limbs and fury. Karuk was stronger, but the days of hard living had made him slow. Naichi was hungry, for victory, for respect, for something Sarah didn't fully understand. The end came quickly. Naichi caught Karuk in a hold that left him gasping, face in the sand. He could have crushed the older man's windpipe, could have ended it permanently. Instead, he held position until Karuk tapped the ground in submission. "My claim stands," Naichi said, breathing hard. "Challenge it again, and I won't be merciful." He released Karuk, who rolled away, coughing. The gathered crowd began to disperse, some muttering, others nodding approval. Naichi turned to Sarah, and she saw the pain he was hiding. The wound had reopened, blood seeping through his shirt. "Come," he said shortly, and walked away without waiting to see if she followed. She did follow, leaving her, washing behind. They walked in silence to his wickiup. Not hers. She noted with a flutter of anxiety. Inside. He sank onto the hides with a suppressed groan. "You're bleeding," she said unnecessarily. "It's nothing." "Hey, it's not nothing. You could have avoided the fight. Let you handle Kuruk." His laugh was pained. "He would have broken you like a dry stick." "I've faced worse than grabbing hands," Sarah shot back, though she knew he was probably right. "Have you?" He was studying her again with that intense gaze. "What worse have you faced?" "White woman." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then began gathering what she'd learned the women used for wounds: willow bark, clean cloth, water. As she worked, she spoke. "My father died when I was 12, lung fever from the mines. My mother took in washing, mending, anything to keep us fed, but it wasn't enough. The landlord came one night, drunk, saying he'd forgive the rent if she'd—" She paused, focusing on cleaning the wound. "I hit him with a poker from the fireplace. Nearly killed him. We had to leave town that night, walk 15 miles to the next county." Naichi hissed as she applied the willow bark paste. "You were 12. 13 by then. Old enough." She began wrapping the wound with practiced movements. "Mother said I had the devil in me, hitting a man like that, but she also said the devil was sometimes useful." "Your mother sounds wise." "She was." Sarah tied off the bandage, sitting back on her heels. "She died 2 years ago. Told me to find a good man, live a safe life, have children who'd never know hunger." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I thought I was doing what she wanted." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, camp life continued, children playing, women working, the eternal rhythm of survival. "Why did you fight for me?" Sarah asked finally. "You could have let Kuruk have me. It would have been easier." Naichi lay back, staring at the wickiup smoke hole. "You asked before why I took you, the full truth. In that moment at the wagon, you reminded me of someone. Your sister." "No." His voice went soft. "My woman, Dawn Light. She had your color hair, your way of standing straight even when afraid. The soldiers took her 3 winters ago during a raid, said they were arresting her for hiding weapons." His jaw tightened. "She was hiding food for the children. They hanged her at Fort Grant as an example." Sarah's hand stilled. "I'm sorry. I thought taking you would ease the anger, balance the scales." He turned his head to look at her. "Instead, you confuse me. You're nothing like her except in small ways, but you're not what I expected from a white woman either." "What did you expect?" "Weakness, cruelty, the things we see in your soldiers, your settlers." He touched the bandage she'd wrapped. "Not this, not kindness from someone who has every reason to hate." Sarah gathered the medical supplies, needing something to do with her hands. "I do hate you sometimes, for taking me, for destroying my life, but—" She struggled for words. "My mother used to say hate was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And you saved me today. Whatever your reasons for taking me, you've protected me since— I don't understand you, Naiche, but I'm not sure I hate you anymore." He sat up despite the pain, reaching out to touch her face. His fingers were surprisingly gentle. "You shine like Dawn Light did. Not outside, inside, even here, in this hard place. You shine." Sarah's breath caught. This was dangerous territory, this softening between them. She was engaged to Thomas, was supposed to hate this man who'd stolen her freedom, but his touch was warm, and she was so tired of being alone and afraid. "I should go," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, but neither moved. A child's cry outside broke the spell. Sarah pulled away, standing quickly. "I'll bring you food later. You need to rest. Let that wound heal properly this time." She left before he could respond, before the moment could become something neither was ready for. But as she returned to the river to finish her washing, she felt the other women's eyes on her differently. The story had already spread. The white woman who'd stood up to Kuruk, who'd tended Naichi's wounds, who might be more than just a captive after all. Lilui was waiting by the washing stones. "You did well today," she said grudgingly. "Kuruk is pig, but Naichi—" She shook her head. Be careful. White woman, that one carries too much pain. Don't add to it. I don't intend to add to anyone's pain, Sarah said quietly. I just want to survive. Lilui laughed, but it wasn't unkind this time. Surviving is easy. Living, that's the hard part. Maybe you learn that too. In time. As Sarah returned to her washing, she wondered if living and surviving could be separated so easily. In the weeks since her capture, she'd focused only on surviving each day. But now, with Naichi's blood on her hands and his words in her heart, she wondered if something more was possible. Not love, never that. She was promised to another, and Naichi was her captor still. But perhaps understanding, perhaps even friendship. Strange as that seemed. The sun climbed higher, and Sarah worked alongside the Apache women, her pale skin reddening despite the plant oils they'd taught her to use. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests. But today, she'd proven something to them and to herself. She was not broken. She would not be broken. And maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to belong. The sandstorm struck without warning, turning day into twilight and air into a weapon of grit and fury. Sarah had been gathering mesquite pods with Lilui and 2 other women when the western horizon darkened to an ominous brown wall advancing across the desert. Run! Lilui shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the rising wind. They scattered, seeking shelter, but Sarah became disoriented in the sudden blindness. Sand scoured her face, filled her nose and mouth. She stumbled, fell, crawled forward with no sense of direction. Her carefully learned landmarks, the red mesa, the twisted juniper, vanished in the roiling darkness. A hand seized her arm, pulling her against a solid form. Naichi. She knew his presence now, the way he moved, the cedar and sage scent of him beneath the dust. He dragged her into the lee of a rock formation, pressing her down and shielding her with his body as the storm raged overhead. They huddled there for what felt like hours, the wind howling like all the demons of the desert set loose. Sarah buried her face against Naichi's chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady while the world tore itself apart around them. When it finally passed, they were half buried in sand, coughing and spitting grit. The landscape had changed, dunes shifted, familiar paths erased. They were alone, the others nowhere to be seen. The horses, Sarah gasped. The village. Safe. This wasn't a big storm, just sudden. The others will have found shelter. He helped her stand, brushing sand from her face with surprising gentleness. But we're too far from camp to return before dark. These storms, sometimes they circle back. They found better shelter in a small canyon where ancient peoples had carved handholds into the rock. A shallow cave offered protection, and Naichi quickly gathered what dry wood he could find for a fire. As darkness fell, they sat close to the small flame, sharing the last of his water. You came looking for me, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. You think I'd let Karuk claim my prize so easily? The words were light, but his eyes were serious. You're under my protection. That means something among my people. And what am I to you, exactly? Your prize, your captive, your... I don't know. The admission seemed to surprise him. You were meant to be revenge, justice, a balance for what was taken, but you... He stopped, frustrated. You make things complicated. Sarah laughed, short and bitter. I make things complicated? You stole me from my life, brought me to people who hate me, and somehow I'm the one making things complicated? Yes. He turned to face her fully. You were supposed to be weak, supposed to cry, beg, make me feel powerful. Instead, you work beside our women without complaint. You face down Karuk. You tend my wounds after I've given you every reason to let me bleed. Basic human decency isn't complicated, Sarah shot back. Isn't it? His voice dropped. My sister showed your soldiers decency. She shared food when they were hungry, gave them water from our precious springs. They repaid her with death. The fire crackled between them, casting shifting shadows on the cave walls. Outside, coyotes began their evening song, wild and mournful. Tell me about her, Sarah said softly. Your sister, what was her name? Naichi was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Morning Star. She was 12 winters. Smart. Too smart, maybe. She wanted to learn everything, our ways, but also your ways. She'd trade beadwork for books from the fort, teach herself English from traders' children. His voice carried old pain. I told her she was foolish. Told her the white world would never accept her. I was right, but being right doesn't bring her back. Sarah moved closer, drawn by the grief in his voice. And Dawnlight? Tell me about her too. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Stubborn as a mule, fierce as a mother bear. She could track better than most warriors, shoot straight as any man. Her father was Mexican, taken in a raid as a child and raised Apache. Her mother was Chiricahua, from Cochise's own band. Dawnlight was... He searched for words. She was tomorrow. All our tomorrows. When they killed her, they killed more than one woman. You loved her very much. Love. He tested the word like something foreign. Yes, but love wasn't enough to save her. His dark eyes found hers across the fire. Just like your Thomas's love won't save you. He probably thinks you're dead. And if he knew you were here, what would he do? Bring soldiers? Start a war that would see my people slaughtered? The mention of Thomas sent a spike of guilt through Sarah's chest. She'd thought of him less and less as the days passed, his face growing hazy in her memory, while Naichi's presence became more real, more immediate. He's a good man, she said weakly. I'm sure he is. Safe, predictable, everything a woman should want. Naichi's voice held an edge. Will he still want you after this? After you've lived with Apache, learned our ways, been marked by our life? That's cruel. That's truth. Your people don't forgive women who've been with Indians. Even if nothing happens, they assume, they whisper, they judge. He moved around the fire, closing the distance between them. So I ask again, what are you to me? Sarah McKenna. Her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. I don't know, she admitted. I should hate you. Sometimes I do. But then you shield me from sandstorms. Fight for me. Speak to me like I'm a person instead of a symbol. You confuse me too. Naichi. He reached out, fingers ghosting along her cheek. That first day, when I said the Apache had taken a bride, I spoke from anger, but now, his thumb traced her cheekbone, leaving a trail of heat. Now I wonder if the spirits knew something I didn't. Don't! The word came out breathless. We can't. I can't. This is just... It's the situation, the isolation. When I get back, if you get back... His hand dropped, but he didn't move away. The army is looking, yes, but finding one woman in this territory might as well look for single drop of rain in the desert. So what am I supposed to do? Give up? Accept this life? Forget who I was? Maybe remember who you are? His eyes held hers. Not the schoolteacher's daughter. Not the rancher's promised bride. You, the woman who hit a man with a poker at 13. Who stands up to Karuk. Who survives. Sarah's carefully constructed walls began to crack. That's not who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be safe, respectable, normal. Supposed to be. He made a dismissive gesture. Your whole life. What you're supposed to be. What about what you are? And what am I? The question came out as barely a whisper. He leaned closer, close enough that she could see the fire reflected in his eyes. Strong, fierce, alive. More alive than any woman I've known since... He stopped himself. You shine from inside. Sarah, even here, especially here. The cave suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Sarah knew she should pull back, should put distance between them. Instead, she found herself swaying forward, drawn by something stronger than reason. This is wrong, she breathed. You took me against my will. I'm engaged. We're enemies. Are we? His forehead touched hers, the lightest contact that somehow set her nerves ablaze. When you tended my wounds, were we enemies? When I shield you from storms, are we enemies? When you defend me to my own people, are we enemies? I don't know what we are. she admitted, tears threatening. I don't know anything anymore. He pulled her against him then, not romantically, but with a desperate kind of comfort. She should have resisted, but didn't, burying her face in his shoulder and letting the tears come. Tears for her lost life, for Thomas, who thought her dead, for this impossible situation that was rewriting everything she thought she knew about herself. I'm sorry, Nietzsche murmured into her hair, for taking you, for your pain, for making you choose between worlds, but not for keeping me. It wasn't a question. No. His arms tightened. Not for that. The Spirit sent you for a reason, even if that reason brings pain to us both. They stayed like that as the fire burned low. Two enemies who weren't enemies. Two souls caught between worlds. Outside. The desert night deepened. And Sarah knew that whatever happened tomorrow, something fundamental had shifted. We should sleep, she finally said, pulling away. The others will worry. He banked the fire and arranged their blankets on opposite sides of the small cave. But in the darkness, Sarah was hyper-aware of his presence, his breathing, the way the moonlight caught the angles of his face. Nietzsche, she whispered. Yes? What you said about me shining. Dawnlight. Did she shine too? A long pause. Yes, but differently. She shone like the sun, bright, fierce, impossible to ignore. You. He seemed to search for words. You shine like stars, quiet, steady. But once you see it, you can't look away. Sarah closed her eyes, his words settling into her heart like seeds in fertile soil. She was changing, had been changing since the moment he'd pulled her from that wagon. The proper young woman who'd set out to marry Thomas Hartley was fading, replaced by someone harder, stronger, more real. Tomorrow they'd return to the village. Tomorrow she'd resume her role as captive, he as captor. But tonight, in this cave carved by ancient hands, they were just two people sheltering from a storm, both the one outside and the one building between them. Her defiance shattered his savage pride. Nietzsche had told his people, but lying there in the darkness. Sarah wondered if he'd gotten it backward. Maybe it was his savage pride that was shattering her defiance, breaking down the walls between who she'd been told to be and who she truly was. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time since her capture, Sarah felt something like peace. The news arrived with a dust cloud on the horizon, riders approaching fast from the east. Sarah was grinding corn with the women when the scouts galloped in, their horses lathered with sweat, faces grim with urgent news. Soldiers! One gasped out. 2 days' ride, many of them. They search for the white woman. The village erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors checked weapons. Women began packing essentials. Children were gathered close. Sarah stood frozen by the grinding stones, cornmeal dusting her hands, her heart torn in directions she couldn't name. Nietzsche appeared at her elbow, his face a mask. Come. In the privacy of her wickiup, he spoke quickly. The army is coming for you. They've been questioning all the bands, threatening war if you're not returned. Then let them come, Sarah heard herself say. I'll go back. No one needs to die for... You think it's that simple? His laugh was bitter. They come with guns, demanding we prove we don't have you. When they search and find you, they'll say we lied, use it as excuse to force us onto the reservation, or worse. So what do you want me to do? Hide. He paced the small space like a caged mountain cat. The council meets tonight. Some say we should fight. Others say flee deeper into Mexico. And some... He stopped, jaw tight. Some say we should give you to them. But not alive. A body tells no stories of willing or unwilling. Sarah's blood chilled. Kuruk? Among others, they say better you die than bring destruction on our children. And you? What do you say? He turned to face her, and she saw torment in his eyes. I say I should never have taken you, but I did, and now... He reached out, fingers tangling in her hair. Now I can't let you go. Not to them, not like this. Nietzsche, you've changed. Sarah, look at yourself. He gestured to her sun-darkened skin. her work-roughened hands. The Apache dress she wore without thinking now. "You think you can go back to being the proper white woman? You think they'll let you?" She wanted to protest, but the words died unspoken. He was right. She had changed, in ways that went deeper than clothing or calluses. That evening, the council convened. Sarah wasn't permitted to attend, but Louie brought her updates. Her scarred face troubled. "They argue like old women," she reported. "Some want war, some want a run. Naichi fights for a third way, to hide you until the soldiers pass. And if they don't pass..." Louie's silence was answer enough. Near midnight, Naichi returned. His face was drawn, but there was resolution in his stance. "We leave tonight. You and I, the band, will tell the soldiers truth. That I acted alone, that they cast me out for bringing danger. It might save them. You'd exile yourself? Leave your people? My people will survive. They always have." He began gathering supplies with quick efficiency. "But I won't let them kill you for my choice. And I won't let the army take you back to a world that no longer fits. That's not your decision to make." He stopped, turning to her with eyes that blazed. "Isn't it? I stole you from that world. I opened your eyes to this one. I watched you become..." He gestured helplessly. "Become more than you were. I won't watch them cage that spirit. And Thomas, my life, you'd take that choice from me again." "What life?" His voice was harsh now. "You think that rancher will want you after you've lived with Apache? You think those proper ladies will invite you to tea, knowing you've slept under our stars, learned our ways? They'll whisper Indian lover, even if you never..." "Never what?" Sarah stepped closer, anger and something else making her reckless. "Never let you touch me? Never admitted that sometimes I forget I'm supposed to hate you? Never wondered what it would be like to stop fighting this thing between us?" The confession hung in the air like lightning before thunder. Naichi went very still. "Sarah, no." She backed away. "You don't get to decide my life again. If the soldiers come, I'll face them. If Thomas rejects me, I'll survive. But I won't run. Not anymore." He caught her arm as she tried to pass. "And if my people decide you're better dead, then I'll fight, just like you taught me." For a moment, they stood frozen, the tension between them near breaking. Then voices rose outside, angry, getting closer. Kuruk's was loudest among them. "Seems the council decided without us," Naichi said grimly, pushing Sarah behind him as the wiki-up flap burst open. Kuruk entered with 3 other warriors, all armed. "The white woman brings death. Better she die by our hands than lead soldiers to our children." "Over my body," Naichi growled. "If necessary." Kuruk raised his rifle. What happened next would be debated in the village for years. Sarah moved without thinking, grabbing the water gourd and flinging its contents into the torch one warrior carried. In the sudden darkness, Naichi struck like his namesake, swift as thunder, devastating as lightning. When others arrived with new torches, they found Kuruk unconscious, 2 warriors groaning on the ground, and the third backing away from Sarah, who held his own knife with steady hands. "Enough!" Old Nana's voice cracked like a whip. The elder entered, taking in the scene with those ancient eyes. "Violence against our own? For what? Fear? The soldiers," Kuruk began groggily, "will come whether she's dead or alive. Killing her solves nothing." Nana studied Sarah, who still held the knife. "But perhaps there is another way." He spoke rapidly in Apache. Sarah caught only fragments, but she saw Naichi's eyes widen, then narrow in thought. "What did he say?" she demanded. Naichi translated slowly. "He says if you were Apache, truly Apache, the soldiers would have no claim. A woman who chooses our ways, speaks our language, lives as one of us. She's no longer the white woman they seek." "A ceremony?" Louie added, having arrived with the crowd. "Not marriage, but adoption. You would become one of the people. But," she hesitated, "it's not just words. You would have to mean it, live it, forever." Sarah's mind reeled. "And if I refuse?" Nana shrugged. "Then we give you to the soldiers. What happens after is between you and them." "Some choice," she said bitterly. There's always a choice, the elder replied. But choices have consequences. Choose the white world, and you return to it changed, marked by your time here. Choose our world, and you leave the other behind forever. Choose neither. He glanced at Karuk, and others will choose for you. Sarah looked around the wiki-up, at Karuk, who wanted her dead, at Naichi, who'd fought for her, at Lilui, who'd become almost a friend, at Nana, offering a path she'd never imagined. When would this ceremony be? Dawn, Nana said. The soldiers will be here by tomorrow night. You have until sunrise to decide. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Sarah and Aichi alone. She sank onto the buffalo hides, knife falling from nerveless fingers. An impossible choice, she whispered. Is it? He knelt before her. You said yourself you've changed, that sometimes you forget you're supposed to hate us. There's a difference between forgetting hate and choosing to become... She gestured helplessly. To give up everything I was? Were you happy with everything you were? The question cut deep. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. But Sarah, he took her hands, and she didn't pull away. I've watched you these weeks. You're more alive here, more real than I think you ever were in that other world. You laugh with the children, work beside the women, face down warriors. You're not giving up who you are. You're becoming who you were meant to be. And what about Thomas, my obligations? What about them? He's probably already held your funeral, maybe even found another bride. Your obligation was to marry him, be a proper wife, live a proper life. Is that still what you want? Sarah closed her eyes, seeing two paths stretching before her. One led back to safety, respectability, a life of knowing exactly what each day would bring. The other led into the unknown, dangerous and wild and utterly uncertain. If I choose the ceremony, she said slowly, what am I to you? Still your captive? Your prize? His hands tightened on hers. No. You'd be Apache, free to choose your own path, to stay, to go, to take a husband or remain alone, to be whatever you decide to be. And would you want... That is, would you hope? I would hope, he said carefully, that the woman who shines like stars might choose to shine near me. But hope isn't demand, and want isn't ownership. Sarah opened her eyes, finding his face close to hers, seeing truth in his dark gaze. I need to think. Think then, but Sarah... He released her hands, standing. Whatever you choose, know that taking you changed me too. Taught me that enemies can become more, that hate can transform into something else. For that, I'm grateful. He left her alone with her impossible choice. Outside, she could hear the village preparing, some for flight, some for fight, all for an uncertain dawn. Sarah sat in the darkness, weighing worlds in her hands, knowing that sunrise would force her to choose not just between Apache and white, but between who she'd been told to be and who she truly was. The knife lay beside her, its blade catching the last embers of torchlight. Tomorrow, it might draw blood or cut bonds. Either way, it would carve a new future. Sarah picked it up, testing its weight, and began to understand what her choice would be. The dawn ceremony had barely concluded when the dust cloud appeared on the eastern horizon. Sarah's hair was still damp with the sacred water, her skin marked with the ritual clay that proclaimed her rebirth as one of the people. The transformation was more than surface. She felt it in her bones. This choosing, this becoming. But there was no time to contemplate her new identity. The soldiers were coming faster than anticipated. Into the canyon, Naichi commanded, his voice carrying over the chaos of breaking camp. Women and children first. Sarah found herself swept along with the others. No longer the outsider, but another pair of hands helping to bundle supplies. Another voice soothing frightened children. The ceremony had been hastily performed, but binding. She was Apache now in the eyes of the band, and she moved among them as kin. They'd barely reached the canyon's protection when gunfire erupted behind them. The rear guard, led by Karuk despite his injuries from the night before, engaged the cavalry's advance scouts. Sarah watched from the canyon rim as blue-coated soldiers poured over the ridge. their numbers far greater than anyone had anticipated. "There!" A soldier's shout carried on the wind. "The white woman! I see her!" Sarah's heart clenched as she realized her pale skin, even darkened by sun and ritual paint, stood out among the Apache women. Her presence was endangering everyone. "Go deeper." Lilui pushed her toward the canyon's shadows. "Hide yourself." But Sarah had made her choice at dawn, and she wouldn't unmake it now through cowardice. Instead of hiding, she climbed higher, making herself visible on a ledge. "Here," she called out in English, her voice carrying clear across the battlefield. "I'm here." The soldiers redirected toward her position, leaving gaps in their line that the Apache warriors exploited. But Sarah hadn't counted on the cavalry's determination or their numbers. They came like a blue flood, threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Naichi appeared beside her as if materialized from stone. "What are you doing?" "Drawing them off. They want me, not—" Her words were cut short as a bullet whined past, spraying rock chips. Naichi pulled her down, covering her body with his as more shots followed. "Fool woman," he growled. "You think they'll stop at taking you? You've seen how they honor their word?" He was right. Even if she surrendered, the soldiers would likely punish the band for having taken her. There would be no clean ending to this. They fled deeper into the canyon system, a running battle through narrow passages and over ancient rock falls. Sarah had learned much about movement in this terrain, but the pace was brutal. Behind them, the sound of pursuit never ceased. At a branching of the canyon, Naichi made a desperate decision. "This way," he told Sarah, pointing down a barely visible side passage. "The others go north to the old stronghold. We go west." "Splitting up?" "They want you. Let them follow us while the others escape." He was already moving, and she had no choice but to follow. For hours they climbed and descended, crossed dry washes and scaled cliff faces. Sarah's Apache dress tore on thorns. Her feet bled in their worn moccasins, but she didn't complain. This was the life she'd chosen. Running, fighting, surviving. As the sun reached its zenith, they paused in the shade of an overhang. Naichi studied their back trail, his expression grim. "How many?" Sarah asked. 10, maybe 12. Good trackers among them." He passed her his water gourd. "They're hurting us." "What?" "Pushing us toward Skeleton Canyon. Dead end. They know this land better than they should." His eyes narrowed. "Apache scouts with them. Turncoats." Sarah's heart sank. If experienced Apache were tracking them, their chances of escape dimmed considerably. They moved again, but now Sarah could feel the trap closing. The canyon walls grew higher, the passages narrower. Behind them, the pursuit sounded closer, deliberate, unhurried, confident. "There's a cave," Naichi said as they entered what was clearly the box canyon he'd feared. "High up, defensible. We make our stand there." The cave was little more than a deep overhang, but it commanded the only approach. They climbed to it as the first soldiers appeared at the canyon mouth below. "Sarah McKenna!" The officer's voice echoed off stone walls. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. We're here to rescue you. Come down peacefully, and no harm will come to you or your companion." Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity. Rescue. As if she were still the woman who'd needed rescuing. "Miss McKenna, your fiancé, Thomas Hartley, is with us. He's been searching for weeks. Please, let us take you home." Sarah's breath caught. Thomas, here. The life she'd left behind had followed her into this wild place. "Sarah?" Thomas's voice, achingly familiar. "Sarah, it's me. Please, come down. You're safe now." She moved to the cave's edge where she could see him. Tall, solid Thomas in his traveling clothes, looking out of place among the soldiers. His face was haggard with worry, and despite everything, her heart ached for the pain she'd caused him. "I'll go," she whispered to Naichi. "Tell them I forced you, that you were taking me to trade." "No. They'll kill you." "Perhaps, but I won't live with that lie." He checked his rifle, his movements calm. "You chose this morning. Choose again now. But choose truth." Sarah looked between Naichi and the gathering soldiers below. between the man who'd stolen her and remade her, and the man who'd loved who she used to be. "Sarah," Thomas called again. "Whatever they've done to you, it doesn't matter. We can go home. Forget this ever happened. Forget," as if she could forget the feel of desert wind, the taste of Apache freedom, the way her spirit had expanded in these vast spaces, as if she could forget Nietzsche's eyes in firelight, his voice speaking her name, his fierce protection that had become something deeper. Sarah stepped into view. The soldiers raised rifles, but Morrison held them back with a gesture. "Thomas," she called, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused you." "Then come down." Hope filled his voice. "We'll go home. Get married like we planned." "I can't." The words fell like stones into still water. "I'm not who I was. I can't be her again." "They've brainwashed you. Stockholm Syndrome. The doc says. But we can fix it. Help you." "I don't need fixing. Thomas, I made a choice." "You made..." His voice cracked. "Sarah, they kidnapped you." "Killed innocent people. How can you choose them?" She thought of the minister's wife, of Jake the driver, of unnecessary deaths that would always stain this story. But she also thought of Morningstar, hanged at 12, of Dawn Light, killed for sharing food, of cycles of violence that no one seemed able to break. "I choose myself," she said finally. "I choose who I've become." "Then you're coming down one way or another." Morrison's patience had run out. "Sergeant, prepare to..." His order was cut short by the sound of rifles, not from the cave, but from the canyon walls above. The rest of the Apache band had circled back, taking positions on the heights. Kuruk's voice rang out in accented English. "Soldiers, go now. Take your man. Leave in peace, or stay and feed buzzards." Morrison cursed, recognizing his tactical disadvantage. Caught in a box canyon with enemies above, it was a death trap. "This isn't over," he shouted up at the cave. "We'll be back with more men." "Then we'll be gone." Nietzsche spoke for the first time, "Like smoke in wind. You'll chase ghosts while we live free." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Sarah held her breath, waiting for violence to erupt. But Thomas spoke again, his voice different now, resigned, perhaps even understanding. "Sarah, is this really what you want? Truly?" She met his eyes across the distance. This good man who'd offered her safety and certainty. "I'm sorry. Thomas, you deserve someone who wants the life you're offering. That's not me anymore." He stood for a long moment, then nodded once. Turning to Morrison, he said something she couldn't hear. The officer argued, but Thomas was insistent. Finally, Morrison gave the order to withdraw. As the soldiers filed out, Thomas looked back one last time. "Be happy, Sarah," he called. "Whatever that means in this life you've chosen." Then he was gone, taking her old world with him. The Apache remained in position until the dust of the soldiers' departure had settled. Only then did they descend, Kuruk first, his face unreadable as he approached the cave. "You brought them here," he said to Sarah. "Yes, but you didn't go with them." "No." He studied her for a long moment. "The ceremony this morning, I thought it meant nothing. Empty words for a white woman playing Apache." He glanced at Nietzsche, then back to her. "I was wrong. You are one of us now. I accept this." It wasn't an apology, but from Kuruk, it was close enough. As the band regrouped and prepared to move deeper into Mexico, away from the soldiers' reach, Nietzsche drew Sarah aside. "You could have gone," he said quietly. "I would have understood." "No, you wouldn't have." She smiled despite her emotional exhaustion. "You would have raged and hurt and eventually healed, but you wouldn't have understood. Because you can't imagine choosing safety over freedom any more than I can now." "When did you become so wise?" "When a warrior stole a bride, but found he'd captured something he didn't expect." She touched his face, no longer caring who saw. "You were right. Her defiance did shatter his savage pride, but maybe that's what both of them needed." He pulled her close, there in the shadow of the canyon where she'd chosen her new life over her old. No more stolen bride, he murmured. Now you're truly free. What will you do with that freedom? Sarah thought of the vast desert stretching endlessly ahead, of dangers and hardships, but also of skies without limits and a life without cages. She thought of this man who'd taken her captive only to set her spirit free. I'll live, she said simply, with you, if you'll have me. Not as captive or prize, but as my woman. Hope and uncertainty warred in his voice. Knowing our life will be running, hiding, fighting for every day. Our life will be free, she corrected. The rest we'll face together. As the band moved out, heading for the safety of the deep canyons, Sarah walked beside Nietzsche with steady steps. Behind them lay the world of Sarah McKenna, schoolteacher's daughter, rancher's intended bride. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a love forged in the crucible of conflict. She'd been stolen. She'd been transformed, and finally, she'd chosen. The desert wind rose, erasing their tracks, carrying them into a future written in dust and starlight. Whatever came next. Sarah knew she was no longer between worlds. She was home. The courtroom in Fort Grant was stifling, packed with curious townspeople, reporters, and military officials. 6 months had passed since the standoff at Skeleton Canyon. 6 months during which Sarah's story had become legend, twisted and retold until she barely recognized herself in the tales. Now, she stood in chains before a military tribunal, her Apache dress replaced by a simple gray outfit provided by the authorities. Nietzsche sat shackled in the defendant's chair, his face carved from stone. He'd been captured 2 weeks prior during a raid gone wrong, betrayed by Apache scouts working for the army. Sarah had been taken with him, their brief season of freedom ending as violently as it had begun. This tribunal is convened to determine the fate of the Apache warrior known as Nietzsche, charged with murder, kidnapping, and inciting violence against the territory of Arizona. Judge Colonel Brennan's voice rang with authority. And to address the unusual circumstances of Miss Sarah McKenna, alleged victim turned accomplice. Thomas Hartley sat in the gallery, his face older than she remembered, marked by months of grief. He'd come, despite everything. Sarah couldn't decide if that made this easier or harder. Miss McKenna, the prosecutor began, you were taken against your will from a stagecoach on March 15th of this year? Yes. During which attack, several innocent civilians were murdered? Sarah's throat tightened. Yes. Yet you stand before us not seeking justice, but defending your captor. Can you explain this transformation? Sarah lifted her chin. People aren't always what they seem, sir. Neither are situations. That's not an answer, Miss McKenna. Then let me be clearer. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Yes, I was taken against my will. Yes, innocent people died, and that will haunt me forever. But I've also seen Apache children starved on reservations, women violated by soldiers, warriors hanged for defending their families. Violence breeds violence. Sir, someone has to break the cycle. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Colonel Brennan banged his gavel for silence. Are you saying the Apache were justified in their attacks? I'm saying nothing is simple in this war between worlds. Sarah met the colonel's eyes steadily. I've lived in both. I've seen good and evil in both. Nietzsche took me as revenge for his sister, murdered at 12 by soldiers. Was he wrong? Yes. Were the soldiers who killed a child wrong? Also yes. When does it end? It ends with the law and order. The prosecutor snapped. With savages confined to reservations where they can be civilized. Like Morningstar was civilized to death? Sarah's temper flared. Like Dawnlight was civilized at the end of a rope. Miss McKenna, the colonel's voice was sharp. You're perilously close to contempt. Then hold me in contempt. Sarah shot back. But I'll speak truth. Nietzsche protected me when his own people wanted me dead. He taught me survival, strength, dignity. He showed me a world where women can be warriors, where the earth is sacred, where freedom means more than comfort. Her voice dropped. Yes, he was savage in his pride, but he was also human. And when I chose to stay with his people, He freed me to make that choice. No one chooses captivity, the prosecutor argued. I did. Sarah's declaration rang clear. At Skeleton Canyon, I could have left with Thomas, with Mr. Hartley. The soldiers were there to rescue me. I chose to stay. The courtroom erupted. Through the chaos, Sarah saw Thomas's face, hurt but somehow unsurprised. He'd known, perhaps, from that moment in the canyon, when order resumed. A new voice spoke from the gallery. May I address the court? Sarah turned to see a woman in traveling clothes, her face familiar yet strange. It took a moment to place her, Mrs. Morrison, the lieutenant colonel's wife. I fail to see what bearing, the prosecutor began. My husband led the rescue mission, Mrs. Morrison interrupted. I've read his reports, heard his private thoughts. He told me something that haunts him still. She looked directly at Sarah. He said he saw a woman transformed, not broken, not brainwashed, but awakened. His words, not mine. This is highly irregular. Colonel Brennan muttered, but he gestured for her to continue. My husband has fought Apaches for 15 years. He's never questioned the rightness of it until Skeleton Canyon, until he saw a white woman stand with them by choice, speak of cycles of violence, of humanity on both sides. Mrs. Morrison's voice strengthened. If she could see past hatred after what she suffered, perhaps we should ask why we cannot. The testimony continued for hours. Witnesses spoke of Apache depredations, of murdered settlers and burned homesteads. Others, more quietly, spoke of massacres committed by soldiers, of treaties broken, of children torn from families. Through it all, Nietzsche sat silent, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. Finally, Thomas was called. He took the stand reluctantly, his discomfort obvious. Mr. Hartley, the prosecutor began. You were engaged to Miss McKenna? I was. Do you believe she's been corrupted by her captivity, that she's not in her right mind? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Sarah McKenna was the most level-headed woman I knew. Practical, rational, maybe too much so. He smiled sadly. The woman I see now, passionate, fierce, alive. I think maybe this is who she always was underneath. I couldn't see it, didn't want to see it. So, you believe she's making these choices freely? I believe, Thomas said slowly, that she's making the only choices she can and remain true to herself. I hate it. I hate him for taking her, but I can't hate her for becoming who she was meant to be. His testimony complete. Thomas left the courtroom without looking back. Sarah blinked back tears, grateful for his grace, mourning the good man she'd hurt. Finally, it was Nietzsche's turn. He stood proudly despite the chains, speaking in clear English. I am guilty of taking her, guilty of killing to take her. This I do not deny. His voice carried no plea for mercy. But I am not guilty of keeping her prisoner. She became Apache by choice, by ceremony, by heart. Among my people, she found her strength. And she gave us something in return, hope that understanding is possible between our worlds. Pretty words. The prosecutor sneered. But you're still a murderer and a kidnapper. Yes, Nietzsche agreed simply. And you are thieves of land and killers of children. We are all guilty here. The question is whether guilt is all we are. The tribunal retired to deliberate. Sarah was escorted to an anteroom, where she waited in agony. Through the barred window, she could see the dusty street where life continued. Merchants hawking wares, children playing, the world spinning on while her fate hung suspended. When they returned, Colonel Brennan's face was unreadable. Nietzsche, warrior of the Apache, this tribunal finds you guilty of murder and kidnapping. Sarah's heart sank. However, in light of extraordinary circumstances and testimony regarding the mutual nature of recent events, this tribunal sentences you to exile rather than death. You will be transported to the Indian Territory in Oklahoma, forbidden from returning to Arizona on pain of execution. Exile. Not death, but another kind of ending. As for Miss Sarah McKenna, the colonel continued, this tribunal finds insufficient evidence of criminal wrongdoing. You are free to go." He paused. "Though I suspect you'll find freedom its own kind of sentence." The courtroom cleared slowly, people murmuring their opinions, some outraged at the leniency, others moved by what they'd heard. Sarah stood frozen as guards prepared to lead Naichi away. "Wait," she called. "If he's exiled to Oklahoma, then You're free," Naichi interrupted. "Free to return to your world. Make peace with your people. Don't waste that freedom on what? On you?" Sarah laughed through tears. "You still don't understand. My world isn't a place. It's not white settlements or Apache camps. It's wherever I choose to make it." She turned to Colonel Brennan. "Is there a law preventing me from traveling to Oklahoma?" The colonel's mouth quirked. "No law against it, though I can't imagine why you'd want to." "Then you haven't been listening," Sarah said simply. They allowed her a moment with Naichi before he was taken away. In that crowded courtroom, under the eyes of two worlds, she took his shackled hands. "This isn't the ending I wanted," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But perhaps it's the beginning we need. Exile isn't death. Oklahoma isn't the moon. And you," he managed to smile, "you shine wherever you are." "I'll come," she promised. "As soon as I settle things here, I'll come." "I know." He touched her face with chained hands. "The Apache warrior stole a bride, remember? But the woman who chose to stay, she stole his heart. That's a theft I'll never regret." They took him away then, and Sarah stood in the emptying courtroom. Neither fully white nor fully Apache, but something new, a bridge between worlds, a living testament to the possibility of understanding. Outside, the sun was setting over Fort Grant, painting the sky in shades of fire. Sarah walked into that burning light, no longer stolen, no longer captive, but not quite free either. She carried two worlds in her heart now, two peoples in her soul. The story that began with violence and hatred had transformed into something neither side had expected, a love that transcended boundaries, a choice that defied categories, a hope that from the ashes of conflict, something new could grow. Sarah McKenna, teacher's daughter, would disappear into the wilderness of Oklahoma. In her place, a different woman would emerge, harder, stronger, carrying the wisdom of two peoples and the love that had bloomed in the harsh soil of captivity and choice. The Apache warrior had indeed stolen a bride. But in the end, what they'd stolen from each other was far more precious. The blindness of hatred, the comfort of simple answers, the prison of who they were supposed to be. In its place, they'd found freedom and each other. And perhaps, just perhaps, a future where understanding could grow from the bloody ground of the past. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. I'm curious, where are you enjoying this tale? Please comment below and let me know what part of the world you're in. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Sarah and Naichi's journey. Did their love transcend the boundaries of their time? What would you have chosen in Sarah's place? Let's discuss in the comments below.